welcome to the Our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Good morning, friends of World Heritage. It's indeed a great honor to open this second webinar on the People's List and beyond, and the opening of India Heritage Week. Our World Heritage Initiative comes on the background of concerns of citizens around the world as to the future role and direction of the Convention and its focus on inscriptions, while Article 5 of the Convention calls for endeavors to put heritage in the life of the community. A lesser-known Article 27 of the Convention relates to educational programs and the responsibility to strengthen the appreciation and respect by peoples of cultural and natural heritage. Moreover, the states parties agree to undertake to keep the public broadly informed of the dangers threatening this heritage and the activities carried in pursuing the aims of the Convention. Indeed, the incredible treasures of India that make up this amazing document, from Ashoka to Gandhi and from Goa to Chandigarh, builds on the rich cultural histories from rock shelters to the stupas and temples and the temple cities themselves. The iconic Taj Mahal and Agra Fort and monuments and mausoleums and forts of Rajasthan show the influences of the intangible and the diverse natural environments from the Himalayas and eastern forests to the Western Ghats. INTAC is a leading organization championing the unprotected buildings and people, and the latest publication on the state of the unprotected heritage of India are documents which need to be circulated so that these lists can be part of a global movement. The role of INTAC in shifting our attention to the lesser-known unprotected built heritage is to save such sites that enrich our lives before it is too late. Already in 2004, INTAC adopted the Charter for the Conservation of Unprotected Architectural Heritage in India. It noted that a majority of architectural heritage properties in India still remain unidentified, unclassified, unprotected, and thereby subject to attrition on account of neglect, vandalism, and insensitive development. Beyond the list is a call to all countries to adopt such a charter as relevant to their own geocultural contexts. Heritage at risk may benefit from social media, digital technologies, public engagement and participation, highlighting places as New Delhi, the vernacular architecture of the Sari weavers and the Khamti tribes, together with community buildings as the Kainor Shop House and the Diwan Chand Dispensary, and these with monuments as the Shiv temples in Rajanawa. Even listed buildings like Hampi and Jaipur are subject to threats, and the importance of grassroots activities is essential in protecting and putting heritage in the life of the community. Today, we have a rich menu challenging the list as such, investigating the inventory as a protection tool, and revisiting the concepts of authenticity based on traditional practices. The listed sites are the tip of the iceberg. However, the physicality is that 80% is below water, and the Titanic did not sink because of what it saw, but at the underwater base that was supporting the iceberg. Similarly, the vernacular and traditional architecture of these unlisted buildings are the base by which we may list World Heritage. Thank you, Intak, Divey, Deepti, and Nimi, with all the panelists for this webinar, and as trailblazers which will add to our World Heritage Initiative and the global report for the 50th anniversary of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for these wonderful words and a great introduction to this session. I am very grateful that you gave us this opportunity to be part of this global professional network. And to start with, we were to have our introductory speech by Mr. K.T. Ravindran, but because of some medical emergency, he is not able to be with us personally, but he has sent his recorded message for us. K.T. Ravindran, for all you may know him, because he's very, very well-known personality in India. He's our advisor at INTAC on the Architectural Heritage Committee. He also has almost 40 years of both academic and professional career, being part of the advisory committee on the Capital Master Plan of New York. And he's also members of several other expert committees of Government of India, IHCN, and others. So I would request Mikey if you can play his introductory speech.
Hello friends. At the onset, I want to congratulate the organizers of this discussion, that is Mike Turner, Divey Gupta, and the others who put their head together to formulate a very substantive text as an approach paper. And out of that paper, I have culled out 6 significant points, which could be specific points of departure for the whole discussion that will ensue. Now, I'll start with the first issue that was culled out. That's about the incomprehensive nature of the World Heritage List. That is some kind of a thrombosis in communication that is inherent in the nature of the World Heritage List. Now, the current system of the World Heritage Listing still remains prestigious and very useful for the long-term protection of more significant monuments. There's no doubt about that. However, if it is perceived as distant and removed from communities, it is due to a structural reason in the process. The current process, as it is always rooted through the governmental mechanism, the problem of remoteness of governance always afflicts the listing. The mechanism for identifying prior to the listing could be open to participation, as well as the post-identification management of the monuments could also be through community ownership. This requires a procedural analysis of the present system to arrive at the sources of this opaqueness in order to remedy them. Can these find a place in this discussion? That's the first point. Second point that I called out is about listing as a tool of protection. Now, listing has been in India the primary tool for planning, identification of heritage value, as well as negotiations for the management of change. Once notified by the government, the listing becomes a framework for legal negotiations, as well as the foundation for further improvement of the listing itself, because it's an ongoing process. It's not frozen in time. It's a moving thing, and significance of significances are discovered on an ongoing process, and more things may get added into the list. And the listing, therefore, is the most significant tool available today for ensuring the movement of wheels of time. It's a very important point. It also assumes that history is not frozen in time. History is a moving thing. It's being created, it's being managed, it's been furthered continuously in process of time. How do Asian countries deal with their listing as an effective tool for heritage management? This is a question that ensues from this idea of listing as a tool of protection. The third point is the varying authenticities. I'm using the word authenticities in plural here, meaning there's a plurality in its real-time existence. Authenticity as a concept is a cultural construct and is not a universally applicable idea cast in stone. The comparative analysis stated towards the end of this discussion should be able to unravel the nuanced nature of authenticity across time and space, particularly in Asia. Often the incomprehensiveness of World Heritage sites stem from the variations in understanding authenticity itself. Can the World Heritage Committees bring in this differentiation in the understanding without losing the core value of authenticity as universally understood now, which is now the backbone of the whole listing process? Next issue is about people's participation. The need for participation is vested in the idea that ultimately it is the community which is the custodian of heritage. However, the current system of listing assumes that community interest is directly represented by governments and that an elected government and their instruments of heritage management actually represent the community interests. But this is not always true. Monuments are often disjuncted from the physical and social context of communities, and new instruments to link the two may be required to remedy the disconnect. Participation can be structurally factored into the identification and subsequent upkeep of World Heritage monuments. How do we strategize this shift in Asia? And the next point is the socio-economic benefit of the local communities. Tourism, which is a primary beneficiary from the listing or from the World Heritage listing, is often in control of large grain economic entities who are not necessarily locally rooted. Specific strategies are required to make sure that money made is spent locally, money made through tourism because of the value added condition after the listing happens is spent locally, and a large chunk of profit moves into vitalize the local economy. However, this requires a planned strategy which has a direct bearing on the sense of ownership of monuments and subsequently in its upkeep and sustainability. Does Asia, which still has living traditions of craft and intangible heritage, negotiate local economies different from that of the industrialized world? That's the question that we need to finally discuss. Now, in the last point, the comparative analysis process, in which several national and regional sites are identified, becomes a significant issue in the final analysis that we do. UNESCO is now privy to a large variety of monuments of universal value, and the comparative analysis of these values must yield patterns that will both demonstrate the rigidities and the flexibilities in the system. That is, it should reveal both its what can be called the rigid dimensions of the listing and the flexible dimensions which can be introduced into the system. Other ways in which these analyses become the departure points for discussions across Asia to reveal localized but shared patterns Mind you, Asia shares its epistemology is a shared epistemology. That's what makes Asia different from any other place. Can this becomes the point which can reveal the localized but shared patterns in Asia? If this discussion yields insights into these above 6 questions, which I am sure it will, the conference would find fruition of intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That was excellent start to our session. You have put a lot of onus on us for several questions that people have been asking for almost 50 years now. And we will try to do some justice and trying to, if not answer, but discuss and debate and maybe come up with some action plans. So some of those concerns and very relevant questions that you're asking, we have a roadmap to answer them. Over to Mikey for introducing about the polls.
Hello, everyone. I have great news. Our World Heritage has had its first anniversary this week on the 16th, and 21 Debate was a tremendous group effort. We have made over 100 webinars. All these red squares that you see on the screen now is an individual webinar. And it was an effort by hundreds of people until now. It has been tremendous. Thank you for your participation. I would like to now introduce a poll for this webinar to keep it a little bit more interactive. We have compiled a series of questions that we would like to invite you to fill up during the panel session. The address for the poll is, and I will post it right now in the chat, is ourworldheritage.org/poll. You can find the poll there. You can fill it in at your convenience, and I will come back with the results in the end of this webinar. So thank you very much. Over to Dive.
Thank you. Thank you, Mikey. Now we will start with our main session. We have 3 very important speakers and 3 very important presentations. The first presentation is by Ms. Vijaya. She is not only a very dear colleague, but has about 20 years of experience working in the field of heritage conservation. She has to her credit more than about 50 heritage buildings that she has restored. But more so, she also has credit of listing more than, I don't know, I think number would be a bit dangerous, but I suppose maybe about 20 to 25,000 buildings that she has listed in the last 5-6 years, being the director of listing at Intact. And some of our projects have also got prestigious UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards. And she also teaches at School of Planning and Architecture. So Vijaya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dive. Thank you, Mikey, Nimi, and my colleagues and friends. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, is it visible? Nimi, if you can confirm.
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you. And my voice also audible enough?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Okay, so thanks again. So I'll be talking about listing as a protection tool, not that the way I have actually done primary survey and a list of 20 to 25,000 buildings, but yes, I think I have reviewed those. That will go wrong because, listing is a very, very decentralization process, So we individuals, we do not go to the field and really directly list. Yes, so I'll come to that point a little later. So I'll first start with, just a minute. Is it better, Nimi? Or do I have to, can I also?
This is fine, Vijaya. Continue.
This is fine. All right. So I'll start with the different layers of heritage protection in India. First, we have the centrally protected national monuments and sites, which is about 3,706 monuments protected by the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act 1958, and which was amended in 2010 to include the prohibited and regulated areas. So on this map, we can actually see the distribution of the monuments, the highest being in one of the largest states of India, which is Uttar Pradesh. So the green ones are, the number of protected monuments in every state. Okay, and there are also state-wise and circle-wise details and maps locating the monuments. So this is for the Jodhpur circle. And the notified areas along the prohibited and regulated area is also available on the ASI website for every monument, for every 3,706 monuments. Now they have these kind of details. So where, the red line is a protected zone, the yellow line is a prohibited, and the regulated is next 200 meters from the prohibited. So, the second layer is the state protected monuments and sites, which is around 5,000, actually a little less than 5,000 in total in all the states, which are protected under the State Archaeological Sites Act. So these two together are not even 9,000 monuments. And it is just so less for such a large country like ours, with an area of 30 lakh square kilometer. On an assumption of at least one heritage building per 1 square kilometer. So our list should actually go to 30 lakhs heritage buildings and sites. So anyways, coming to the third layer of the protection, which is by the local bodies, development authorities, municipalities, which is done under the Town and Country Planning Act. And this layer of protection is a phenomena of last 20 to 30 years, and which is mainly fed by INTAC's listing of heritage sites, which comprises of both public and private ownership, buildings and sites. So as we know that, the national and the state protected are mainly the, kind of built heritage buildings and monuments, but INTAC listing is an integrated one that comprises built buildings, monuments, urban heritage, natural sites, art and material heritage, craft, dance, music, textiles, and all other aspects, various aspects of heritage, and which actually we call, the living heritage, because they are so interrelated with each other, the living heritage or, the people's heritage. So, for this integrated approach, fortunately, INTAC has the diverse expertise in the headquarters in Delhi through its various departments like the Architectural Heritage Division, the Natural Heritage Division, the Art and Material Heritage Division, the Craft Division, the Cultural Heritage Division. But it doesn't mean that, it is done very centralized from Delhi directly. But, INTAC's activity of listing since last 35 years is being done in a very, very decentralized process, and mainly through the chapters, because INTAC is that volunteer organization that has about 220 chapters, all across the country, and 6,000 to 7,000 members, with the chapters. And the chapters and members who are actually volunteers are representatives of people. And, the listing done by the chapter members becomes a people list. And that is how I think, our list also becomes very, very unique and valuable. And, so the listing is purely based on, based on the values, like the emotional values, the cultural values, the economic values, and all this training is given throughout the year, to the volunteers and the members. And this is a very, very active, exercise and activity and objective of INTAC. And this is also not a condition-based, listing that we do. So it is a very, very value-based approach. So what exactly, how we list? So this is basically the volunteers, students, professionals, our members. They reach out to, nooks and corner, to every place. It is a legwork through primary survey. discovering places, with inventory format in English, in the local languages, mapping, they have to map all these buildings, and which has been made quite easy by the satellite maps these days. So in track, over 35 years of the firefighting and that warfort approach has now, the effort has now resulted in a creation of a digital database where the data can be accessed, can be filtered, can be searched, and can be viewed in a list view, on a map view, and an inventory view. So right now we are still entering all the data that we have got over last 35 years into this digital database, which is right now available on a local server, but we are going to soon going to put that on a web-based server and make it available, hopefully. So we are also planning to come up with mobile apps along with this kind of database, and we have also started crowdsourcing not directly crowdsourcing, but yes, through again more volunteers, more students, and we are also conducting throughout the year some internship and training programs, to get the data of the heritage into our database. So now the question is, why we list? I mean, of course, we have been listing, and and the process is also quite participatory and interesting. But I'm also often asked this question: what is the purpose? Why do we really list? Is it only to create a data bank? Yes, to a certain extent, it is also one of the very important purpose of doing the listing. When we are now talking, so many listings by Intact is ongoing on the field. And so Intact has done listings in 450 towns so far, generating database of 70,000 properties, including cantonments and other inaccessible areas. So even we are also going through the cantonments with permissions. It is not just we do a listing from the facade, so we'll have to access all the buildings inside also. So there is several publications as a takeaway as a result of our listings: Delhi, Agra, Chennai, Kolkata, Srinagar. There is a whole series of Ladakh, Bangalore, Bundi, Braj, Banaras. There are also a lot of thematic listings that is being done, like the Register of Garden, Ganga, and other river documentation. There are sites associated with the Gandhiji or Swami Vivekanand and other events and personalities. There are also other takeaways from the listing data, like we are able to generate architectural style, data related to heritage at risk, data related to material and technology, and other vulnerable areas. So these are all to create the data bank or the National Register for the cultural resources. And we also know that the listing is a very, very foundation activity, which then it's like a catalyst. It initiates lots of conservation activities, heritage walks. So I think we have good cases of all these reuse potential cases and heritage walks. This one is in Jaisalmer, and our listing is also used by many World Heritage nominations, including the recent one of the World City of Jaipur, which was nominated 2 years ago. So everybody actually come to Intact, to refer to this listing. But yes, I think the tool for protection is, like the planning and protection is also one of the very, very important purpose of the listing. So it is also, the listing is used as a layer, as information layer for most of the development schemes that has been initiated by the Government of India. So this is the Hriday scheme. So all 12 cities that were identified for the project, they used Intact's list extensive, very, very extensively. So, and many of our listings have also been notified. This is of Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, and it is an ongoing, of course, process. So, and we also are able to use our listing in heritage bylaws, on the heritage impact assessment exercise. And we have also been, I think we have also shared our listing to other government organizations, including Niti Aayog very recently. when they are going to actually make some policies for protection of the unprotected heritage. And also in the lot of PIL cases, this one is the collectorate building in Patna. And whoever in the country, wherever there is a PIL, so the first search is Intact's database for whether it is a listed building, whether it is a heritage building. So you can see that this is a news clipping from a very recent news that the Supreme Court has stayed the demolition order of this building. So our list, also really helps in this kind of protection and to stop the demolitions. And our list is also helpful to identify the gaps in the ASI list. For example, this is the Gwalior Fort. So that there are some buildings inside the fort which are protected, but when we listed, we found out that the fort wall is not listed. So these are the gaps that we also keep on identifying and adding to the ASI database. Like this is another example where the shikhar, only the shikhar is protected by the ASI, but not the mandap. So they create a lot of conflicts and problems in this protection mechanism, but our list also identifies and helps. So it's not only the planning and the protection, but what we really want is our listing should also create people's participation, pride and ownership, not like the cities, the abandoned cities. This is a clip from Sidhpur, Gujarat. Unfortunately, most of the houses are abandoned, but so that is the point. That is why I think we send our volunteers. We encourage the local members to do the listing, not that the professionals going from Delhi or going from metro, they do the listing. So we want a very, very participatory approach, and people come up with the list, themselves, and ask Intact to add it in our heritage database, not the other way. Yes, so I think my 10 minutes are over. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijaya. And I think one of the points of discussion for this theme was about the fundamental change or shift that we need from this arbitrary differentiation that we have created between culture, nature, and the intangible heritage. And I think it was very apparent from your presentation that there is a need for integrating these aspects into the listing process, so that I think we have a more composite and what Katie was saying, incomprehensible. So we hope that we have a more comprehensible World Heritage, which is more of a heritage system, taking care of all the aspects of heritage, be it culture, nature, intangible. With that, I would like to invite our next speaker, Neil. Neil is also an architect and a heritage professional from Nepal, and he is associate professor and the director of the Center for Heritage Management in Ahmedabad University, a very unique program that trains a young professional on the aspects of heritage management of heritage sites. He's also a member of the ICOMOS Nepal, and to his credit, there are several publications and documentation that he has done over his long professional span. So over to Neil.
Thank you, Divya. Hello, everyone. Let me share my slide. It's wonderful to be with all of you again in this initiative. If you can see my slide, I'm given this topic to talk about diverse conservation approaches, drawing from Nepal, but I'm sure this will resonate to many of your situations in other parts also. So I'd like to sort of brief my 10 minutes in this framework. What are the different conservation frameworks which results into approaches in our part of the world? Obviously, the first one I would say is drawn from the philosophies of life, philosophies, cultural worldviews, most of which will overlap with our religious practices, which are probably often at regional level, but there are also various local frameworks, local philosophies, local worldviews, and we need to recognize that. And that would give rise to a certain kind of a conservation framework, which sometimes doesn't really align with our professional attitudes as well. So we have to be careful of that. And then there are institutionalized approaches, which are obviously influenced by global instruments like the World Heritage Convention, and which ultimately results into some set of laws and institutions which sets its own conservation process, which most of us are really aware of. And then there are third type, I would like to say, that actually mixes both the local and the institutional, or local or the global. And to what degree this mix happens is depend on the situation. And if we look around ourselves, I think we'll be able to see this. And then the fourth is really what I would like to emphasize today, is that perhaps we need to be mindful about uniquely local situations or resolutions that may have come in different situations. And some of these I would like to highlight in the next few slides. To start with, I would like to recognize that the two books that I have mentioned here are just examples, just to illustrate, but there are many other in different traditions, different philosophical traditions of the Eastern philosophy or Asian philosophy that you will find, which would often have this idea of heritage, idea of conservation, but without that particular term, because that term comes with its own baggage, so to say. And therefore, what I find is perhaps there is an emphasis on maintenance rather than on this notion of preservation, which I find common. And this is also something I'm reflecting on my first book, Asian Heritage Management, in which we looked at the Hindu philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, and Islamic philosophy particularly, in which there are some common threads to how do they look at the world, how do they look at the practices. And there is this notion of livingness, the continuity, and the idea of maintenance, which is inscribed into several traditions, rituals, and so on and so that. Just one example from my own previous work in Nepal, where we are working on these Buddhist monasteries. And this, the image that you are seeing is almost 13 to 15 feet high Buddha images as a wall painting in a Buddhist monastery. Now, when we're restoring this, what you see in this picture is there are what is called the ancient art, but also there are not so ancient art. And then there are also the missing parts. And in this project, what we really found ourselves in a very difficult situation was this notion of authenticity, how we as a professional are trained to really stick to versus what the local people, the practitioners of the culture and the religion would say as their heritage. And so the notion of heritage would be here. To keep the story short here, in this particular instances, we're asked by the local villagers to repaint the entire wall painting. They didn't care whether it's ancient or new. They needed the entire Buddha to be complete there. And they didn't want to see their Buddha and Bodhisattvas to be amputated or incomplete. That didn't make sense to them as a heritage. And this idea actually resonates in some of the World Heritage sites, also in Kathmandu and elsewhere. So this is something I would like to mention as an example. The other one, which is not from a World Heritage site, but from nearby in Kathmandu Valley, it's a very mundane, everyday example where, the notion of the dichotomy that we often go with, that Vijay was earlier referring to, the nature versus culture, the tangible and intangible, this all comes together and poses a very deep question to us to really challenge our own professional thinking processes. So the people here, we typically tend to see, okay, who is responsible, who is doing what, or who is not doing what. But in fact, in these everyday practices, you will find the heritage idea, but also conservation approaches really being entangled with so many everyday concepts that often we tend to overlook. I'm not going into detail, but this is a very interesting case. And there are similar cases I've seen in India also. This is something I would like to mention. This is perhaps, in my opinion, without doing any archaeological dating, but knowing that this comes from an area which has one of the ancient part of the Kathmandu Valley. This is on the street level now. I'm sure this is as old as one of some of our ancient statues that we have found in Kathmandu Valley. But I think the reason this particular statue, this sculpture is protected is by being unprotected and by being constantly being touched and rubbed and being eroded and being destroyed in that manner on its physical fabric, but that very act of ritual, the ritual act that happens every morning, the evidence are visible here, are actually the technique of preservation, in the sense not the material preservation, but preserving the value and the importance of this particular object in the middle of the city, right? So this actually is a philosophical challenge to what we think as a conservation in mainstream practice. So the culture versus material preservation. Another example I would like to mention is from this Swayambhunath World Heritage Site in the Kathmandu Valley, where there is this small temple in that complex, where there is a very interesting ritual that there is an inner shrine in this temple where nobody is allowed, only the priest is allowed to go in. And so during one of our meetings that were held there by ICOMOS, this challenge came that this needed to be repaired. And so how do we, so the question of documentation was there, because how do we document, how do we know what's inside, how do we, carry out our professional duties, whereas nobody's allowed. So a very unique situation arose. It led to some discussion, and we resolved that, no, we have to follow the rituals, let the priest authority decide. And luckily, one of the priests also happened to be carpenter. So he was given in charge of documentation, assessment, and repairing. And so I think this is also found in many other shrines in Kathmandu Valley. Some of them are in the World Heritage Site, some of them not. But this is something that ritual themselves as a methodology of conservation, it's something we have to think as a context-specific approach. Again, a long story here, but just wanted to flag here. And to come back to conclude my points, three examples from the recent post-earthquake rehabilitation of Kathmandu Valley. The Kasta Mandap, one of the fully destroyed monument, but really the crux of the Kathmandu, the name itself comes from this one. When this was being planned for reconstruction after the 2015 earthquake, there were so many protests from the local communities of different interest, but the crux was when we're trying to introduce, when I say we, it's the broader community, not me or an agency. When the new techniques were being introduced, thinking that the traditional ones were not safe, not good enough, the community really protested, and the resolution finally, after so many struggles, so many rounds of dialogues and debates and protests, they resolved to follow the traditional methods. Local people really came forward. Now it's been restored. So this sort of tells me that the local community is at the core of this approaches, whatever we want to think of. So that's one point I would like to highlight. The second is conservation also as a process is an activism. And that was very much seen in another site in Kathmandu Valley in the reconstruction of Rani Pokhari, actually rehabilitation of Rani Pokhari after the earthquake. The temple that you see now is there used to be another temple, but this is now going back to the earlier form. But more importantly, this whole idea of the pond, how the water was retained, and how it should be reconstructed. These entire debates went through several rounds of debates and discussions and protests and consultation meeting and all that kind of things, which makes me think perhaps we need to also think very socially that conservation process is also an activism. And that is something we have to now imbibe in our thinking process. It's not just a technical process. And Rani Pokhari to me is a very interesting recent case from Kathmandu Valley. And then the third one I would like to emphasize is really on this part of the governance. And here again, from the Kathmandu Valley, the small city of Bhaktapur, the town of Bhaktapur, is a case where since the 1970s, several approaches have been tried, from the Bhaktapur development project by the Germans to several other projects that were being done here. But after the earthquake, what is really interesting to observe is the local municipality really came very boldly forward and denied any external supports and said that we can take care of our heritage, we'll do it our own way. That's a wonderful thing. But also in doing too local a way, sometimes there has been also criticism, or there has been concerns about, okay, are we going too far from the global to the local? And so I think very recently after the 2015 earthquake, in this process of reconstruction of the heritage in Kathmandu Valley, we have seen a mix of approaches that have been happening. And I would say not one approach probably fits all the concerns, but I think there are enough lessons to be learned. So with this note, I think my time is up, so I'll stop here. But I hope I'm able to share with you some diverse approaches that I have observed in case of Nepal. Thank you very much. And more I can elaborate if there is time during the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. And I mean, you have also added to our question bank that Katie put. But yes, I completely agree. There's so much of learning process, so much of learning from each other. I resonate, or your presentation does resonate with several of the challenges that we face, not only in the World Heritage, but otherwise. But I was also very happy to note that this sort of conflict between the little, so-called the little tradition with the great tradition is almost a universal phenomena. And I think it's also important that we recognize both the little traditions as well as the great traditions and reconcile them to suit the local need. So thank you, and we will of course continue our discussion during the panel discussion on those very, very interesting points that you raised. Now the third speaker, Dr. Sharif Imam. He's also a specialist in heritage management and heritage tourism. He teaches, he researches, and has a professional experience of almost 25 years. Currently, he is the academic coordinator for the Cultural and Heritage Management Program at Macau Institute of Tourism Studies, and also visiting faculty at University of Hong Kong, and a president of ICOMOS Bangladesh. To his credit also, he has several publication and conservation projects, including heritage impact assessments and tourism plan. So Sharif, over to you. We look forward to hearing from you on your topic on looking within and beyond the list. Imam.
Thank you, Divay. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and listening to this presentation. So, given this topic, we're looking within and beyond the list, and I will present this by referencing to one of the recent projects that we undertook in Bangladesh is to update this tentative list. So, the last time it was updated is 1999. So 22 years, we haven't done anything on that aspect. So there's almost zero institutional memory of the last tentative list updating exercise. So the people who had, we worked with together, almost, none of them had, any knowledge on how to do this. So one of the things that we did is to engage the wider community as much as possible in the process. So what I'm going to do in my short presentation is to look at the three aspects that we have learned through this exercise in last 1.5 years. And then a few conceptual understanding, I would say, that might help us when we go forward or thinking forward with this one. Now, the first one I would talk about is the systemic issues related to the World Heritage inscription process. I have just copied from the World Heritage Center's website. On the left-hand side, you can see the India's tentative list, which includes 45 sites at the moment, and the Bangladesh current list, which includes 5. And after the recent update, we are planning to propose 8 sites in total. Not additional 8 sites, but 8 sites in total. So that doesn't include this in the same way, because it had to, there are a lot of changes in the last 22 years. So we had to revise the whole thing altogether. Now, in doing so, what we found that, as I said, we invited proposals from the wider community. And we received 21 proposals from NGOs, different bodies, enthusiastic bodies, universities, even individuals. So the 61 sites that proposals that we received, and when we tried to see how we can evaluate them, we realized that if we apply this World Heritage criteria as a main reference, then none of them can be listed actually, or included in the tentative list. So we worked hard to see how we can combine them, sometimes in a thematic way, and if some of them can actually, after some modification, be meet some of these criteria, we can at least say with some confidence that they can meet some criteria. So after a long process and shortlisting and presentations by all these bodies to understand what they're doing and what they're proposing and how we can work with them, eventually we have these 8 proposals for inclusion in the tentative list. So in the process, we could not include many sites that were considered by many bodies very important for Bangladesh. So we understand that part because our World Heritage has a very high requirement. So we cannot just include all the sites. But what we also found that there are other issues, such as when we try to put them together, then many sites will become serial nomination. And in serial nomination, the current system of listing in Bangladesh is very fragmented. So you have specifically the property boundary, very specific, very narrow, that is listed. Now, when we try to combine this under the serial nomination, we realize that there are a lot of management issues, administrative issues involved. And then there are also some communities who are not represented. Well, these initial proposals were made, were not really in support of this kind of nominations. So this is one issue that we understand, that if you want to apply World Heritage criteria and want to have a broad inclusion of all sorts of important heritage sites in a country, it's not always possible. Then what happens with this tentative list? We know that we can't really nominate many sites every year. In the case of India, probably it will take 20-30 years just to have only these sites listed. And if you add more in future, we can see that this World Heritage nomination process is not going to be the most suitable approach. In the case of Bangladesh, maybe it's easier because the list is shorter, but we also realize because of the current capacity, even for each nomination, it will take 3 to 4 years to complete. So that means in an overall length of only for the 8 sites could be another 30-40 years for us. So we should not really depend on the World Heritage as a way to protect our important heritage. But the problem is the other sites are in a bad shape. And this is because of the economic resource availability. One is that each nomination can cost, and those who are involved in the process know it could cost millions often. And we don't have the money to just invest all the resources that Bangladesh currently has in one nomination. And that would mean that all the other sites will be affected and neglected. So how we deal with this, one of the things that we realize that many of these sites do not have to be on the World Heritage list or not even on the tentative list to be protected, because many of them are actually being managed or somehow protected by communities in certain ways. Not all of them, but many of them. But again, the issue is they do not meet our heritage criteria, heritage management criteria. So they do it their own way, as Neil also mentioned, we gave some examples. So how do we incorporate this? How we enhance or take reference to this process and incorporate in the management process? Now we talk about, in many ways about stakeholders and stakeholder involvement, and we try to do that. But we also found in this exercise that there are bodies, stakeholders who are very interested in protecting it, but they don't have the capacity. Those who have the capacity, then they don't have the interest in protect the heritage. So one of the important areas that I think, it's also our realization is that we need to, work on this capacity building, not only of the professionals, but of the people or the people in bodies that we consider as stakeholders. Now, we already know there, I mentioned about this, there's this social capital, there's this, something we refer to this as a civil society, but then also this, we have the another layer of the governance system, the government. So how did they interact and how we can work together? I mean, this is a nice diagram, shows that, in a well-functioning state where you have a strong social capital, many things can happen in quite easily and in a very effective way. But then there will be places where we have very low social capital, and then the governance system is not as established or strong, and then we can have situations, a lot of issues. Now, this is also a way to understand that not all places, all countries are in the same situation. So there cannot be just one system, one solution that fit everyone. So this is something else we also need to understand. Now, thinking about empowerment, because that's the ultimate goal of the stakeholders' involvement, because only then, without direct government's intervention, without direct experts' intervention, we can still have proper management of our cultural and heritage resources. This is just looks a bit complicated diagram, and I quickly just explained to this one that ultimately this better decision means it's the decisions made by the public. They manage themselves, they are their own resources, their own heritage. Now, if we want to do that, want to reach that goal, we can't do it in a short time, because this capacity building of the public requires an iterative process, because every time they get engaged, they learn something. And the next time they do something, then they would make a better decision, their capacity to make better decisions will enhance. But then you also need other supportive elements. We also need the help or the bridging by the civil society, or so that they can connect what we call this government layer and the community layer. And only that way this can happen. But then this has to start somewhere. Often what we see that we just say that, well, they are not ready for this, they can't manage themselves, and now we need a strong intervention from outside. And that way we keep these people always dependent. So if we really want to think beyond the list, we know the limitation of the World Heritage listing. It can generate a lot of interest, but it also divert a lot of attention to few specific sites while other sites suffer. So probably if you start thinking how we, if we consider ourselves as the playing an important role as a civil society in the heritage management process, can bridge these two layers, the community layer and the governance layer. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. That was very, very interesting. And it also sort of reminds me that when the listing process for putting additional sites on the tentative list was happening, initially there were 200 sites, and which would mean like 200 years. And even today, if you look at the list, it will be like about half a century that will take in there to put all the sites. But having said that, I see your point that, yes, India to a certain degree has used putting several of these important sites on the World Heritage, perhaps also as a protection mechanism, knowing pretty well that maybe some of these sites would never make it to the World Heritage site. So as Vijaya explained to you on the limited protection that we have, and also the remaining 154 sites and maybe a little bit more, the government of India was planning to sort of institute something called the National Heritage Site. So it is sort of a World Heritage system which is nationalized. And I think another very important point that I think both you and Neil pointed out was the need to also rethinking the professional approach. And I think it is also, I think we do tend to only look at the World Heritage process or the nomination process. But I think it's also equally important that us as professionals also really need to really relook at the kind of professional approaches that we look at, and from a very technical heavy approach that we tend to do, we also need to include the social aspect. And you very beautifully brought out that if we need the community participation, if we need uh, the people to participate in the process, we first need to empower them. It is not enough for us to say that the civil society should be involved, especially in the Indian context. Before we start the panel discussion, maybe I would like to just add a few more of my personal comments, just so that there is more interaction. I think few of the comments that I wanted to bring have already been covered in terms of the need for a fundamental change in looking at our heritage as a composite heritage system, integrating culture, nature, intangible has already been thought about and talked about. And I also feel that the first theme was on digital technology, and there was some discussion on this theme there. And I find that the use of digital technology can also facilitate that integration. The second point, which I think both Vijaya and Imam have already covered, is how listing can also be used as a protection device, as an empowering tool. The diverse conservation approaches, or I would rather say contextualized conservation approaches, is another aspect that has been brought out, which perhaps also needs to be looked at as part of the nomination process. And, you know, another thing I wanted to really also add to this discussion, which I personally felt doing a few of the nomination, is that as part of the nomination process, there is also something called a comparative assessment or analysis. Some people, of course, have some views about it, on it to be a bit dated or not contemporary. But having said that, it has some of its advantage. And on my own, I have, because some of my work is also in Cambodia, and when I have started to place the Cambodian sites, the 3-4 sites that I have worked and a few of the Indian sites that I worked on, and started to place them on a map that the sites have been compared with. To give example of the recent nomination that I looked at was in Cambodia on Kokhe. And they were close to about 13, 14 sites that they had compared it with in Cambodia, a few in Thailand and Vietnam, and close to about 10 sites in India. And when I start placing them on a map, it actually emerges that this is like a heritage network. So these sites are not happening in isolation. They are sort of in a network, and of course, based on certain criteria, that network expands to even South America. So I feel that many of these sites that are used for the primacy of the nomination and which are creating these networks also needs to be really looked at as part of the World Heritage Site. And because I think they are generally forgotten the moment the site becomes is nominated or declared as World Heritage, the sites it has been compared with so are still either relegated or are not offered the same protection as the World Heritage. So this was my another contribution, that again we should really look at things as heritage systems and network. Mike or Mike, if you want to intervene right now, want to say something, otherwise we can start our panel discussion. Mike, would you like to intervene, or Mike? Mike, you are on. Mike, you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think we should move into the discussion. I think this is.
All right. Thank you. So just the two announcements before we go into discussion, that we will be happy that if you ask for any questions from either the panelists or the moderators or the speakers, or even from Mike or Maike or Nimi, they will be happy to answer. If you have any points to contribute, you are most welcome to put it on the chat, and the volunteers will flag it to the particular speaker. The other thing is the polls, the link of which Mike has already shared with you. We are requesting you to please fill those polls, because that will also add to the survey on the World Heritage. If you have not done it, we would encourage you to put in the polls, and there's a small session after the Q&A that Mike will take and also announce the poll results. So since we have heard the three speakers, I would like to maybe start with Haising, our first panelist. And if she would like to maybe tell us about the process in South Korea, how it is, the listing process that is used in South Korea, and how that particular process helps in the World Heritage listing, and how, if at all, the civil society and the local participation is encouraged within South Korea. Haising, please, would you like you to intervene now? And after that, I will request Arunaji to say a few words.
Okay,
Haising.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Dive. And it's really wonderful to join all of you once again. Since I joined this network this January. Well, can I share my slide?
Sure.
Yeah. I have just one page slide. I just make a very brief, introduce about one system introduced by Korean government in 2001. Actually, this is about the national, cultural heritage registration system. I'd like to share our experience on people's participation in the listing process and how listing has contributed to the protection of heritage sites. To be honest, this process is not designed for World Heritage listing. Nonetheless, there is some implication we can think about. That's why I brought this case to this webinar. This is a kind of collaborative listing process between the local communities and the concerned local authorities in cooperation with the central government. Well, actually, in Korea, there are 7 different state-designated official categories of heritage that are protected under the Cultural Heritage Protection Act. These categories actually cover tangible and intangible heritage and places of scenic beauty or natural resources, so on. However, the recognition of the heritage types associated with the 19th and the 20th centuries, such as urban architecture and landscape or industrial complexes, were received relatively less attention and were not taken into account for inclusion in these official categories. Unfortunately, in Korea, due to a very rapid urbanization and development after the Korean War in 1950, these heritage sites has been actually threatened, prior being acknowledged their values. And at the same time, we understood that the appreciation of these, heritage sites should not be reduced, considering the significance as, invaluable cultural historic resource for regeneration, revival of, certain heritage value. So for this reason, the National Cultural Heritage Registration System was introduced in 2001. At the early stage of this system, we actually focused on listing a single monument or an individual building. But in order to protect, those types of heritage sites holistically, the system was then reformed in 2018 to list, the historic street or district or villages and so on. So as you can see in this slide, this is one example, which was listed in 2019. This is Inner Harbor in Gunsan, actually located in Korea. It's actually historical, social value were recognized as an important testimony to history related to opening of a port to trade with other countries during the Japanese occupation era and the Korea's early industrialization period. So as you can see in this map in the left side, the section highlighted in orange color of the map represent the cultural historical zone, which are being protected as a whole rather than individually. So because of this listing and coverage in a certain area as protected zone, there are two factors are crucially important. The one is the involvement of the community who possesses the buildings or land within the protected area. And the second is the active participation and willingness of the local authorities to cooperate. So these two factors actually play a very important role in preserving kind of authenticity and integrity of a modern cultural heritage site. So what implication we can derive from this preservation basis and the community lead registration system? I'd like to point out the first thing is that it actually draw the attention of the public to and raises their awareness regarding the necessity for the preservation of 20th century heritage sites. So thereby, leading community participation in the listing process. This is one way to resolve the imbalance between the identified and underrepresented heritage of Korea. The second point is that this place's authenticity and integrity could be maintained to a certain extent through the holistic approach to various values within the historical and cultural context against the further deteriorations or destruction. Another last important point is that it actually helps to continuously discover and fill up the national registered inventories. As I already pointed out at the beginning of my talk, that this system is not designed for the World Heritage listing. However, it's very good to initiate a good starting point because from the beginning stage, the conservation effort led by the community can really pave the way for strengthening the state of conservation first. And then the sum of the registered inventories might have the potential to be considered or re-examined in the future as a state-designated heritage site. So once it have been, counted in the state-designated list, they can be also a candidate to be included in the tentative list of World Heritage Korea. Actually, there is an ongoing discussion now is very actively doing in Korea to how we can integrate this, 20th century heritage into the list. So this can be the foundation for such kind of effort for conservation management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hai Singh. That was a very interesting case study, and I'm very happy to know that Korea is taking measures for having a more diverse nomination, both at the national and the World Heritage level. I would like to now invite Ms. Aruna Bharti-ji. Aruna-ji was actually part of the process that had revised our tentative list that Imam just showed. And maybe she can also tell us more about both the process, and she also may also like to comment or give her observations on the points that have been brought out by our speakers and panelists. Aruna ji, over to you, if you can hear me. Aruna ji, are you there? You're on mute, Aruna ji. You'll have to unmute yourself and then maybe speak.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Start the
Aruna.
video
Thank you.
or no?
Yeah, you can start the video, yes.
When do I have to start?
Yeah, now.
Thank you. Start it.
But whatever is comfortable. If the video has a problem, you can also just speak.
No, no,
You
no,
can
no,
just speak also.
no, no. Yes, thank you so much, Devi. No, I did ask if I could speak on the video, but it said that I can't speak on video because the host has muted me. So I'll
Okay.
hear the host. Let me start.
I think you have a problem with your connection, Aruna ji. We cannot hear you properly.
How do I make it better? Do I have to? So if Devika, if I cannot be seen, oh, okay. Apologies, because I need technical help. Luckily, Devika, my daughter-in-law, is here. So what I was trying to say is that no, I won't go into the reasons. Anyway, now you can hear me and see me,
Yes,
perhaps.
Yes, yes.
Is the volume
Can,
is the volume okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. And
volume okay too? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will be fast. For being in and out on this whole very, very well structured seminar. I did hear the beginning and I wanted to participate more, but anyway, it's a subject that I'm passionate about. And I think this has been one of the best opportunities I have had to hear this debate at a world level in my own country. Okay. For some personal reasons that I won't go into now, but in and out was unavoidable. The second point I'm making is that I'm so very glad that I could at least be present at this one, because everything I've heard so far has ignited even more passion in me and more ideas that I would like to discuss with the participants that I have heard. For instance, just Mikey's point, makes very clear that in keeping with the overall trends on World Heritage criteria, India does in fact have a 3-tier filter from local, state, and national in terms of intact, supported by, not supporting, but supporting the state structures as a private body. That link is there already. Then there is at the state level also state protected monuments, which come under state legislation and acts and things. And then there is the local, what to preserve, that comes under state, I mean, a local town and state planning. Now there, it doesn't work as the it doesn't work quite so smoothly, because at the local level, there's a lot of politics involved, making it work as smoothly, because there are so many views, and the views are all, in fact, to be, how shall I say, certainly heard, and preferably arriving at a consensus. The reason that I feel even more passionate about this than when I chaired the tentative list process that you spoke of, Divek, is that I'm a little bit disheartened, because at every level, I find that the discussion and the 3-layered excellence is leading to more dissension or doubts about the other side and somehow breaking down. So if we don't quickly react, I'm afraid this whole thing of what is our future might be so scrambled up, almost making it impossible put that first point or third point. What is this? Okay. If I can go on, and please excuse me if I go over time, stop me anytime. Completely support, would plead to be allowed to enter this whole exercise in some way, even though I don't have to comment in the sense that I don't have a directly relevant degree to boast of, nor do I have direct experience in heritage conservation, while in government everything relevant to also. So I can't say that I've really been in the heritage sector for a consistent time. However, with all modesty, I would say that I have some reason to be quite passionate about this. I know that credibility would be a better word, or my interest would be a more modest word, but I really am very, very keen. And I think what I could bring is perhaps just my life experience, having traveled a lot, some amount of degrees in structure and logic and that sort of thing, and some experience in government on how politics could either improve the process or perhaps dismantle or what shall I say, fragmentize the process. So I'll just stop here, but I would like to have a one-on-one video or whatever discussion with some of the people if they would hear me, while this important discussion in this particular conclave or whatever is still fresh in our minds. So thank you to the organizers, and thank you to the chair particularly, if she can forgive me for missing one opportunity she didn't give me to connect, and to you, Deve, and to all the others that I have shared friendship and this interest in, particularly as leading the what shall I say, the tentative list process as chairperson, and then a particular bit of work I did in Chanderi in specific, which brings alive existing art that needs to be protected, to my mind, the pure Chanderi, because it's getting very quickly commercialized, plus the location, which is stunning, plus whatever little remains of the actual heritage sites in the sense of vernacular architecture. So with that, I'll close. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Arunaji. I'm very glad that you also brought out the aspect of politics, which is inevitable in any World Heritage nomination. And I completely agree with you that we should also be aware of that, because I mean, without politics, I suppose there would be very little support even for the nomination. So I am just asking our volunteers if they have been able to collect any questions in this meanwhile. Ira, are there any questions right now?
There are no questions
right now. Okay, great. So maybe just to kickstart discussion, I mean, does the speakers or the panelists want to ask any questions to each other or to the moderator or to Mikey or Turner? You are also most welcome. Maybe otherwise I can also ask a few. Anil, Vijay, Haisang, Imam, if you would like to ask any questions to each other. Neil, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the hand is not visible because of this
No,
contrast issue. I was just curious. I mean, this can be either to Iman or Vijay. I'm trying to think from the, what is called the bottom-up approach, or the community-led approach, or something like that. I'm just curious if in both of your experiences of listing, whether it's for World Heritage or else, what's the status of any community being so eager, so interested to get their heritage recognized. They are not ignorant about it. They want to get it recognized. They understand it, but yet they might have something that they would like to do slightly differently, not as a World Heritage, not even, so have you come across, because I'm just curious, because unless we have that that burning desire from the communities, I think all our empowerment, it's going to struggle. So I was just curious, have you come across any instances like that?
Imam?
Okay, maybe I'm sure Vijay has a lot more to share because of our long experience with listing. I just quickly share, what we have learned during our tentative list updating process. And this is very common for religious sites. Because when it's a living religious site, then the people managing the site or who are connected to these sites, they have their own aspirations, their own interests, requirements. So for them, if World Heritage doesn't bring any direct benefits, then they don't have any interest at all in doing so, because they also fear losing their control over their own sites. So the benefits, again, then often we fail to show them, apart from tourism benefits, which can bring some financial benefits to them. But again, these communities are not involved in tourism, so they are not sure how they will benefit from it. So the issue of helping them to see the listing of a heritage site is quite complicated, because the first thing or the easiest thing to see is the economic benefit, and then often what we are trying to do, they perceive that we are going to limit this economic whatever things they could get from it. And in some cases, it's not because of the tentative list. In some cases, we have seen, especially in urban areas, listing actually expedites the demolition process. Because unless you have a legal protection, a strong legal protection and enforcement, then listing creates panic, and then panic triggers quick demolition of overnight demolition. When everything is closed at public holidays, overnight is gone. So this is just what I've seen happening. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, for putting that very interesting question. Well, as you know that even our listing, what we are doing is not really related to the World Heritage List, because it's we have such I would say abundance. You see, it also takes some time with the community to connect with them. It's not that they will welcome our team at the first instance. Okay, we have had also examples that our team is being chased by them, or snatched the cameras, or tear off. But you see, that is what that I think involving the local people to have a small a meeting to also understand what we are doing. Okay, so you see, it doesn't really make sense to just go and with a camera and with an inventory and just start doing the survey and the list. So one has to have one has to give some time to preparatory time. So having said that, I think what Timon also said, the listing also results into demolition, because that is the fear. I think that is the fear factor that people have with the limited understanding or of the process. You see, in Jaipur, after the World Heritage Site nomination thing, the Jaipur listing was the most difficult one for us. We have had a MOU with the Jaipur Nagar Nigam, the Jaipur Municipal Corporation. It is very difficult because they had so many questions, and they wanted to know the benefits and why do they have to be part of this World Heritage boundary, and their property has to be the World Heritage. So they had so many questions. So that means, you see, before the World Heritage nomination, maybe there was a lack of this kind of a community discussion. So we have had the most difficult, time listing it. But in Meghalaya, in one of the states that we are doing, there are so many heritage buildings again in Shillong and other some big towns in Meghalaya. There we had to put an advertisement in the newspaper for the community to bring in information about their buildings, or people, if you are interested, people who are interested to add to the intact list, please come forward. That was a kind of positivity, or people were so happy to get their buildings added to to the list. So you see, and I think ours is also such a large and diverse country and community, so we have had different experiences at with the different states and the community. So it is difficult to generalize, but yes, I think the state, the consultative process, the preparatory thing is very important than just go and start doing the work. It takes really a lot of time, but yes. Yeah, thank you.
But Neil, just to add, I mean, just for specific World Heritage, we get several requests from various community groups, either phone calls or they'll just walk. We have a wonderful site and it deserves to be World Heritage. Please help us put it on the World Heritage. I mean, it is nowhere even in the tentative list. So somehow they feel that we are some key to that. And when you explain them the whole process, how complicated it is, and it's not only about the value, some of them do get a bit deterred, but some really pursue also. I mean, which also shows that they have a lot of passion for their heritage, and somehow they feel like this is the very quick way of certain protection. And maybe even like maybe certain gains also, like, maybe through tourism, that this site will become like a tourist hub and hundreds of people will start coming overnight to their site if it becomes World Heritage. So I think that is also in the back of their mind. And, also I feel here, maybe, the way I see the World Heritage is like on 3 pillars. Only one of them is really related to the value aspect. And second is on what perhaps you were talking about in terms of integrity and authenticity on its condition. And the third is the conservation and management. And I feel that like what Imam was also saying, that if you do not involve the community in all these 3 aspects, all these 3 pillars from the beginning, then I think the models generally fail. Because I think even to a certain degree, even if you look at the nomination, the communities come way towards the end when you're talking about tourism and management. There is no obligation on the state parties to say, like, if you consulted the local communities for this nomination, but there is certain obligation, like how will the tourism impact them? How will the local communities be involved in the management? So, but if I think there is a built-in system within the nomination where the state parties are obliged to look at this valuation, look at the integrity and authenticity, and also look at the conservation management at a local level, it perhaps will be a more pragmatic change in the nomination process. Imam, would you like to maybe also pose a question to anyone?
Yeah, I was just before do that, I just have a follow-up point. Is that often we start with the listing, and then we follow the the remaining steps. But especially for World Heritage or any conservation, especially if it's in urban areas, if we just focus on heritage, I think it's very hard to convince people, because when they are suffering from a lot of this, other issues, and then we say, yeah, heritage is so important, we need to invest in it. But we have some good cases in different places. I like the Hazrat Nizamuddin project very much, because that area, is not just conserving the monuments, but it's also improving the quality of living environment, which benefits the local people. And when they see it, they support conservation. We have also seen, although it's a limited scale, but in Lahore, Wall City, they also have these kind of initiatives where, people's livelihood, living condition improvement, these are an integral part of the heritage conservation process. That means, heritage management has to be integrated with the overall development process. So it cannot work separately. Yeah, sorry, you're saying that there's a question for me somewhere?
No, I was asking, would you like to ask? I think
Okay.
Aruna has asked. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a question. They said that she agrees, Arunaji agrees with the point made by you, particularly true for the religious side. Keen to keep the original iconography and see no benefit in listing. So that is, I know, sorry, it's for Neil. And she was asking what happens, like, she says that she understands your point of dilemma in keeping that original iconography, but what happens if that poor groups like the vernaculars have particular concerns because they fear they will be wiped out before the lengthy process that listing process entails? Neil, you would like to answer to that?
No, I
think
don't
what
see
she's
a question
asking
particularly.
I
Yeah,
think she's
right.
So I think what she's saying is that is it due to ignorance that they are purposefully not getting it listed, or is it because of the process that they fear that they will lose ownership, that they don't list it?
Yeah, I don't know what is the question exactly, but I think on that point, I would think what I have also observed with some of the tentative sites in Nepal is the reluctance from the community is what Iman said. They fear that there will be more restrictions, more laws imposed on them once they become some sort of heritage, recognized list or site or building. I think that's the case in Kathmandu Valley that I have seen as a student when we were going to document several buildings in even the boundary buffer zone areas and all that. They will just literally shut the door because there is this fear. With the new tentative sites also that's happening. So I think that's why I was asking this question, that I think the future really lies in a situation where communities come forward. They are strategic about it. They see, okay, this is, and I think that's something we have to recognize as a professional, that perhaps our role is to facilitate them to be interested. I think Iman's last slide had that, that if they're not there, they seem to be ignorant or they're not aware, they're not keen, then I think our role is to work behind. It's not so much of a technical thing, it's more of social engineering perhaps can come in here to ignite that interest, to spark that curiosity and pride and all that. And once they come in, then I think they will come to us, say, okay, can you help us? Like Deve was saying, I think that's what we should be waiting for, rather than we going with our band and start, beating the drums there. I think we're not going to create a music that everybody will appreciate. So I think we're on the same page there. That's what I see.
Thank you. So we also have with us the convener of this theme, Mr. Dennis Rodwell. Dennis, would you like to say a few words? I know that you also have a lot to contribute, especially related to your points on the list overshadowing the convention. And there are several other articles that are overshadowed just by the list. Would you like to say something, Dennis? Yeah, we can very well. Yes, yes, and see you too.
Good. I turned myself on. First of all, as you probably know, I started out as the lead convener on this theme 11. And one of the first things that I did was to change the title of it from The List to Beyond the List. Now, my concept for that may not be agreed by everybody or by some people. But my concept was that next year, 2022, is the 50th anniversary of the convention. not the list. The convention was in 1972, the list began in 1978. And the difficulty that I have, if you like, intellectually, is that the entire focus of our World Heritage is on celebrating the list, not the convention. Now, the convention has a preamble which refers to the world's, with a small w, small h, heritage, cultural and natural. It has an Article 5, which has been largely forgotten, and it has paralleled by a 1972 recommendation to do with national heritage, which is almost totally forgotten. And what I'm seeing is a complete change in context of time between 1972 and 2022. In 1972 was the emphasis which developed with the list was on the selective survival of a few key objects, because it was only a tangible heritage convention. We now, one of the speakers right at the beginning correctly pointed out that the linkages between cultural and natural heritage, tangible and intangible, have become siloed, become put into little boxes. And my concept is that we need to start from first principles. What in 2000, looking forward to next year, 2022, is it all about? In a time when we are talking about climate change, when we are talking about sustainability, when we are talking about the exploration of natural resources on planet Earth. And my concept was to look seriously beyond the list, to look from first principles as to what we are trying to do. What is the aim? Now, one of the speakers talked about demolition. Now, there's a particular councillor on Glasgow, the largest population city in Scotland, who is moving towards the notion that demolition should be banned, outlawed. All demolition, because we can't afford to keep on throwing things down and pulling them up because we don't have the resources to do it. We don't have the resources in terms of material. We don't have the capacity in terms of energy without disturbing the projections on climate change. So and now I come from the United Kingdom, so which is quite different from the context in India. But we have a projection in Scotland, where I live, that 85% of the buildings which exist today will still be in existence in 2050. So the question of what is heritage needs to be discussed from first principles. Heritage is not just selected objects. Heritage is all, in English heritage, now historic England, they define the historic environment as everything that is around us. So I simply want to add that from my standpoint, in my country, on the edge of Europe, we doubtless, or at least I personally doubtless, have a different perspective from India, where very shortly you will be the most populous country in the world. You're certainly very substantially larger than Scotland and the United Kingdom. That there are different perspectives from different countries, from different parts of the world. But in the poll that Mikey put out, I decided to be cavalier because from my perspective, World Heritage is the Gucci or the Versace of heritage. The aristocracy of heritage is what Gustavo Aroche has described it as. We're not in that age. Do we still have to go by branding? Do we still have to go by the selective survival of the elite? So I just put that out as my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. This is very, very thought-provoking. And thank you. And in fact, that's exactly what I was also saying, that we need to unshackle heritage from these silos and also start seeing as a heritage system or a network and not a particular single point on the map as a World Heritage. We should really celebrate the heritage, not the particular site. I don't know, Nimi, how are we doing with time? Otherwise, I have very quick questions, but we can.
I think we have about less than 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so I think you were to summarize. So do you need a break or?
I think I can summarize now, unless Micah wants to show the results of the polls quickly.
Or do we have, sorry. I just wanted to check with Ira if we have any questions, or I had two quick questions, one to Haiseng, because Haiseng among us is from the, I mean, she's a digital expert on World Heritage. Is that I just wanted her to just say very quickly, like maybe in a minute, if there is a possibility of what we are saying of integrating heritage or creating an integrated heritage system, can that be empowered by the digital technology today? And maybe how? Haiseng.
Yes, for surely. I mean, for the inventory, in order to to make the list of the inventories, actually we need a kind of system to collect those kind of information in the holistic way. But with using a traditional way of just drawing or paper or printing something like that, the capacity is not really covered everything together in one place. So in this point, of course, the digital technology can be a very effective tool to collect such kind of information integratedly in one platform. But my concern is that how can you capture, for example, intangible cultural heritage with using digital technology? Of course, there is a technique. We can use a volumetric 3D scanning to capture how can they dance or how can they make, craft, etc. But it is really to document everything that we need to make this kind of information platform for the heritage inventory purpose. So what I would like to say is that yes, it's possible. However, we actually should think about what kind of possibility the digital technology has. I mean, depending on the different tools and software, etc., what kind of the capacity they have. So after careful review on this kind of technology as a mapping, then we might have a solution to give us to make such kind of the consolidated platform, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy that you pointed even the limitation of technology. So we can't even rely completely on technology. But yes, I think we need to still create systems which are much more, which can really integrate heritage and make it more comprehensive, as Katie was saying. So I'm sorry, we are almost out of time. If there are no questions, Ira, can you confirm if there are any questions or comments? Otherwise, we will just.
So there is an open-ended question put by Aruna Bakshiji, and it says, how do we collapse the timing between the definitions and the understanding between the global, national, and subnational, and to the communities also? How do we bridge the gap between the definition and understanding?
Neil, would you like to answer that? Because you were talking about mix and the local, global.
I think, yeah, this question deserves multiple sides to it, but I think one of the fundamental is on us, to the professionals, to rethink our own position and our own thinking, because I think we are the ones really blocking this process. That's my personal viewpoint. I think it is where you have to start, and then it will go on to World Heritage, you can go on to government and all that, but I think we have to take the onus on us. Thank you.
Great. So as per the program, Mikey, you will, Nimi is to now give us the summary and takeaways from this session on this theme. Over to you, Nimi.
Thanks, Divya. I'll very quickly run through the presentation that I have made based on the panelists, what they talked about, and based on the questions that Katie had posed initially. Just give me a moment to present. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, you can make it full screen or something. But,
is it okay now?
Yeah, that's better. Yes.
Okay. So let's begin with the questions very thought-provoking questions that Katie had posed to all of us in the beginning. He started with the issues that are there in the existing World Heritage inscription system, and he highlighted few points like heritage does not necessarily put people in the light. It is very non-contextual, and the concept of authenticity is also questionable. The incomprehensive nature of World Heritage inscription, he also posed that it's very incomprehensive, and it is also very distant because it does not include people. It's not very inclusive of the local communities. And then he closed his session by sharing some solutions which he feels can resolve these issues, which are using listing as a mechanism to identify local cultural assets prior to the inscription, and then post identification the asset management should also include people participation. He also shared that listing should also be used as a tool for protection to ensure that there is a continuity in the listing process that is being done, and it's always updated. He also said that authenticity of cultural assets should be viewed as a concept of a cultural construct, and a comparative analysis across time and space should be done so that the understanding of authenticity is comprehensive as well as contextual. Lastly, he shared that people, the local community, should be empowered because ultimately they are the custodians of heritage, and hence it's also necessary to bridge the gap between the government and the community for a shared responsibility for protection of cultural assets. After his sharing, I think the questions that he posed and the solutions that he shared were mostly synonymous with what our panelists had also shared in the discussion. I'm sorry, he also shared that the socio-economic benefit to local communities should also be there, and it can be done through tourism because currently the situation is that tourism is largely in control of large institutions, and the economic benefits of it not necessarily goes to the local community. So he said that this system should be changed, and the tourism industry should benefit mostly the local. And lastly, a comparative analysis process, we should be able to recognize patterns that demonstrate the rigidity and flexibility of the existing listing system. Then coming on to our presentations, the first presentation by Vijaya ma'am was about listing, of using listing as a protection tool. She shared that that in tax particularly, from what the issues Katie sir had posed in the beginning, she shared that we should make listing a decentralized process, which is very necessary, and we should increase people participation through decentralization of the listing process. She also shared that an integrated approach of listing should be done by identifying various types of cultural assets, not only built architectural heritage, but also natural heritage and intangible cultural heritage as well. She then went on to share that Intact has been doing the listing process in a very decentralized manner with the various chapters across the nation, which are about 220 in number. And all the members of Intact in the various chapters are the local people who help us list the local heritage assets. She also shared that listing is not only based on the architectural value, but also on emotional, cultural, and economic value. Because the local people are the ones listing these cultural assets, they are able to recognize the emotional and economic value of those assets as well, which not necessarily might be understood by the by others. She shared that empowerment to locals is also done by training the local people who are the members of Intact throughout the year, and then a standard listing format is also shared with these people who are doing the listing in local languages. So this makes the listing process a lot more easier and a lot more relatable for the locals. The local process is then in a way globalized by digitization process, which is still in progress. And the cultural resource data bank is also created by the digitization process, which can then be used to generate architectural, like this whole listing, digitize this listing, and the database can be used for various other users. For example, we can identify heritage as at risk from the list. We can identify particular architectural styles in particular areas or particular time periods from this list. So lastly, she shared that this database is not only useful for us, the professionals, but is also very useful for the local bodies. And we found this in the recently when the Hriday scheme, which was a national scheme for heritage sites in heritage cities in India, they used the information from this database very widely. And the list was also used by the local authorities to identify and then ultimately protect them. And they also used this list for heritage impact assessment for certain proposed projects, and also to identify the gaps in the existing national protected monuments. Uh, after So this presentation basically covered all the questions that Katie sir had raised in the beginning. And I also had the opportunity to work on the listing with the listing cell with Vijaya ma'am, and I know how much decentralized this whole process is, and how much it helps understand the local assets in a very contextual manner. Then we came on to the diverse conservation approaches. I have divided the sharing in two basic categorization. One was the issues that we are facing currently and the solutions that were proposed by the panelists. So the issues were mostly categorized into philosophy of life. The religious and local views need to be recognized, which are not recognized right now. The institutional framework has influenced the institutional framework is very much influenced by the worldviews, the current worldviews, and it also is applicable to us professionals who are in a way blindsided by the worldviews of conservation approach. And then he also raised that local and global approaches are also seen in various sites, but how much this mix should be, how much the local and global influence can influence on the conservation approach is necessary, is something that we need to understand. He proposed some solutions like we should be mindful of unique local situations, which is not the case in most of the conservation approaches. The community notion of authenticity also needs to be identified. Like he shared one of the, I think, a religious it was an idol which was being worshipped. So even though the materiality of the idol was not being protected, but since it was identified by people as something important, the religious value of it, which in this case might be the authenticity of that idol, was protected. So these kinds of notion of authenticity also need to be identified. The protection of culture, not necessarily the technical preservation, but preserving the inherent emotional and social value, needs to be done. We also need to be context specific in terms of our conservation approach, and understand the site in a holistic manner and not just through the worldview that we generally study. And we should also understand that one size does not fit all. So every site has something unique about it. So the conservation approach and the solutions that we come up for conservation should be very much site specific. Then Coming on to the last presentation we had, we discussed the systemic issues with the World Heritage inscription process, which identified that the local values are not recognized as outstanding universal values. It was also shared that serial nominations cannot be possibly done for all the sites, and hence sites which are similar to the ones that are inscribed also need to be identified, if not by the inscription, World Heritage inscription, but by the local bodies. Then it was also shared that unavailable economic resources for nominations also sometimes lead to the heritage sites which are significant not being recognized. The solutions proposed were that the sites that are protected can be protected by local community themselves, even though they do not meet the universal management standards. So there is a certain, there is at least some level of protection for significant sites. Capacity building for primary stakeholders needs to be done. And by primary stakeholders, I mean the local communities who are the custodians of the heritage sites. We should also develop strong social capital by making sure that the civil society and the government work together and take responsibility of cultural assets. And finally, the empowerment of stakeholders. We should give the communities the power to make decisions for the local heritage sites that they are most relatable to. And this was mostly the discussion. Thank you. I think I have exceeded my time limit. Sorry for that.
No, maybe this was perfect. And I hope a lot of these recommendations and action plan will feed into the OWH overall theme and recommendations that they are proposed to give in 2022 for the 50th year of the convention. Mikey, the last honors would request you to do.
Thank you very much.
The thank you and the announcements.
Yeah, thank you so much, Divey. I think you're totally right in saying that this webinar is a very, very, it has given very, very good inputs for the recommendations. It was very complete and full and rich. I would like to share with you my screen to show in a very, very direct way the results of the poll questions. Thank you so much for answering. We have received 10 answers. We will continue throughout the month to build up on this poll. So for now, the first question asks which site means the most to you personally. Well, this is not particularly relevant for this team, but it's interesting to know. Some people don't have favorites. The second question, what is in your opinion the most important value of protecting World Heritage on a global scale? So 50% has answered learning and collaborating. 20% has said it is for next generations. So this learning and collaborating really is about us, and it's something that we need to do now and together. So it shows the relevance in that sense of the World Heritage, in that sense. What is the best way for local communities to engage with World Heritage? It seems to be that participating in ongoing site management is the best way to go. The rest of the points, such as contribute to updating the World Heritage tentative list, support the nomination process, and more than so and a combination of those is also chosen. No one has answered provide visitor service. In your country, does World Heritage listing upgrade the protection compared to national listing? This is a 50-50 situation, which is quite interesting in itself. I think everyone gets their own lessons from this. do you think we need to nominate more World Heritage Sites? It shows that there is no definite answer. It really depends. It shows that debate is very important. What sites would you like to see inscribed on the World Heritage List? So there are some who name a particular sites, but there is also more general answers. The particular sites, well, you can all read with me. I don't think I will make, I think I will make a lot of mistakes in the pronunciation. But some people also say, like, more generally, we should nominate more mixed sites, trade routes, and cultural landscapes. More living sites, or more international or serial nomination. Then which sites would you take off the list? Well, it's of course a difficult question. One says I would review all the sites nominated before 1985. There's also someone who says bundle the similar sites into one, for example, the wine landscapes. Which sites would you think need extra protection? Here, protection is the wrong word. My focus is on inhabited urban sites. Continuity should be the operative word. Including responsiveness to changing lifestyles and expectations, and adapting to changing climatic and weather conditions. And then the second says also World Heritage Sites, cities, which is also inhabited urban sites is the same. Vernacular architecture worldwide, Stonehenge, a very specific one, and any site that is under sudden threat should get extra visibility. What changes would you say make World Heritage more relevant today? Changing responsibility of the committee. Second, public participation, grading, and monitoring by civil society. So again, including civil society. World Heritage has become the pinnacle of branding and commodification. I think this is the answer of Dennis that he just referred to. He also names Article 5, which is about civil society again. The next is people's participation in stakeholders consultation. It's again about civil society. Give people back their identity. Resolve the ownership issues, collaborative process of ownership for all living heritage sites. Then there is participatory processes in establishing tentative lists and engagement of civil society. So this is a very unified answer, I would say. It's really about, it reflects that World Heritage is about learning and collaborating. And yeah, given the nature of the question, it seems that this is really the next step in the future of World Heritage Sites. It would really make it more relevant today. Everyone reflects back to the people and collaboration and learning from each other. So I think, yeah, until now it gives, the poll gives a yeah, unified view. I hope this, I think this fortified a lot, or this strengthens a lot of what all the speakers already said. We will continue this poll throughout the month, and we will make sure the results will be in a clear way in the public realm in the end of the month. So you can keep an eye on our website. Then my last addition, and I think the closing of this, I would like to say that we have, this was the second event of the list of Beyond the List months in November. The third one will be on the 24th. It's Unsilencing the Past. It's about documentation and pedagogy beyond the list. And the last one is also about more like the education and new heritage governance in combination with sustainable development. Thank you to all our conveners, INTAG, the IFLA, ICOMOS IFLA, the Technion, and the Centro Patrimonio Mondial, Centro Patrimonio Cultural. In general, thanks to the conveners, and a specific thanks to Mike and Dennis, who have done a lot of content preparations in the last few months. I would also like to thank Dive very much for convening this webinar together with Deepti, who could not be here today, and Nimi. And most of all, I would like to thank for now the speakers of today, Vayaya Amujuran, Neil Kamal Shapagain, and Sharif Iman and Heisun Shim. Also, thank you, Aruna Bachi, for your additional comments today. With that, I would like to maybe give the final words to Dive.
Thank you, Mikey. I have nothing else to say, but again, thank from my bottom of my heart to everyone, all the panelists, speakers, who are also, all of them are also dear friends and colleagues. And it is always very nice to meet them, if not offline, at least online like this. Though Vijaya I meet every day, but she's a colleague. But yeah, it is very nice to meet after so many years, Neil and Imam, Nimi also. And I would definitely like to also thank both Mike K, and Dennis for providing Intact this opportunity to host this very important seminar. And I hope that the discussions and deliberations that we held today would in some way help in making the change that the OWH is foreseeing in the World Heritage process. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And of course, all the participants who were also took time in attending this, our two volunteers, Maitre and Ira, who also kept the proceeding going on. And we will encourage all the participants, the panelists, to also participate in the other sessions so that we can continue this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day and good night and good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.